Welcome to the 4 Mile Circus, the official podcast of 4 Mile Circus, which is a media production and social media services company based in Brooklyn. Check us out at 4milecircus.com. That's the number 4, followed by the word Mile Circus. My name is Sean Mannion. I'm a writer-director in Brooklyn.
And I'm Nicole. I'm the other half of 4 Mile Circus and a writer, director, producer based in Brooklyn. On this podcast, we will talk to independent artists and media makers about their relationships with social media. If you like what you hear, please subscribe on iTunes or your platform of choice and give us a 5-star review. It really helps spread the word about the show.
We're going to be live streaming this and future interviews on Facebook as we conduct them. So like 4 Mile Circus on Facebook to be notified of future live streams so you can see all our mistakes and comment with questions for the guest. Some questions may even make it into the show.
This is the 3rd episode of the 4 Mile Circus, and we are appropriately enough featuring part 3 of our multi-episode interview with the multi-talented indie film writer, director, producer Christina Raia. On this episode, we will be talking to Christina about how she used social media throughout production of her debut feature film, Summit. But first, special just for you, is our social media tip of the episode.
Nicole, do you have a tip for us?
Yeah, I think I do. I think I do have a tip for us.
You have a tip for us.
The social media tip that I have for all of us today has to do with timing of your posts and being experimental with said timing. There's kind of a general rule of thumb, which is that you usually want to be posting to social media when the most people are there. So it depends like where you are and where your target audience is. We're in North America, in New York City, and there are, in general, more people in the Eastern time zone than any other time zone in the United States, so I've heard. So general rule of thumb, if you're speaking to a very US-centric and English-centric, in this case of me, audience, you want to kind of do that by Eastern Standard Time, roughly business hours. Like business hours during the week is when people tend to be looking at social media. Generally, people tend to be looking at social media more as the week goes on, as it's getting closer to the weekend. People are doing less work at the office and spending more time on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So that's the general rule of thumb. That said, you want to experiment. Like, for instance, I do horror movies. There are a lot of people who like horror movies who are up real late at night looking for stuff on Netflix. So I like to tweet sometimes late at night when I'm also up and can't sleep and looking for horror movies on Netflix. So whether you're following our advice or any other article or consultant's advice about the peak times to post on social media, use that as a guideline, but then mess around with it and just pay attention to what happens, because you may find that the better recipe for you is something other than the conventional wisdom. And in general with social media, follow guidelines and then experiment with them and see what happens. And if something works, keep doing it. And that's my tip for the day.
Nice. Cool.
So
Good tip.
It's an excellent tip.
Thank
Probably
you.
the best tip that we had all episode. So we're talking to Christina Raia again, and Christina is director. She works with The Seed and Spark, and we've introed you a few times, but why don't we just kind of dive in this time? If people want to know more about her, like we just did 2 whole episodes with her, just go listen, and then we'll do that. So let's start with we're going to continue talking about Summit and your other projects, and Summit in terms of like sort of the life cycle of a project. We want to focus on production, not just really like production, but pre-production. And also post-production, and how you used social media in that process. Just to kind of start that conversation, where would you say that you probably used, and maybe it was most useful for you to use social media in that sort of pre-production and then post-production process?
Where, in what sense? Like what?
Like, I mean, even from getting together cast for your films if you're in pre-production, and anything else that you need to prepare, did social media play a role in how you've coordinated that?
Yeah, like maybe where did you use it the most to start, and then we can get into some specifics.
Sure. Well, I definitely used it for kind of putting out cast and less cast, but definitely crew, like finding crew. I own a production company called Congested Cat Productions, and it's a small team of us. We met at school, and I run the company, and I direct most of the projects and produce all of the projects. But we were so small, we just kind of had like an editor and random crew members, like hands essentially. We didn't have like a deep resident DP or anything like that. So I posted on social media a lot to find, the main camera crew and pretty much every position that wasn't a post-production position. And it was really beneficial because I was able to post ads, and it was a no-budget film that we didn't even have the funding for yet. It was before we crowdfunded it. So it was great to kind of meet people that wanted to just like get involved in a bigger project than they had done before and were kind of on my level in that way, but in like more technical positions. And yeah, that's how I met most of my more current collaborators, like my DP Peter and stuff like that. So it was definitely most beneficial there, at least early on, like in the very early stages of pre-production.
Nice. So, and did you use it while you were shooting, during production?
Yes.
Did you use it?
I mean, I was like, we shot an 80-minute film on location in negative degree weather in Massachusetts in 16 days, only 12 of which were shooting days. And so it was really intense, and I was like under the most pressure I've ever been under in my entire life. And I was definitely not like on social media. I checked out. Like I went into production and said, you won't hear from me, but you'll be hearing from other people on set. And then like came back at 6 a.m. when we wrapped, and I like thanked the world on Facebook. But during that time I was not active. I had other people like sharing on Instagram and doing stuff, but we were not rolling out as much content as I would have liked during production because the person I had assigned that job like decided to just sleep a lot in the house while we were all out in freezing cold, so that didn't work out. But I made it a point to like get on social media the second we wrapped and start sharing all the behind the scenes content that we had accumulated over the 2 weeks that we were on location. When I shot my web series 4 months later, which is called Kelsey, it was very different. I was less pressure, so I had more time to just be like snapping photos and just going live on set in various ways. But yeah, I mean, Summit was a learning experience in that regard of like you need to be active but also focused. Right. And I didn't have the best balance in a lot of ways for Summit.
That makes sense. And then so post production, I would assume on some level that it becomes a little easier. Not necessarily. I just mean in terms of sharing like the post production process. Did you do a lot of that?
Yeah. Well, because I had crowdfunded the film and had kind of built this audience of people that they were anticipating the film, I was able to, despite taking a little bit of a break during production, I was able to come back to those people and say, okay, here's where we are, and start sharing the entire process of post with people, like through stills, like sharing stills before color correction and then after, and like doing videos with the cast, like interviews with the cast, and just kind of various visual updates all throughout post. I mean, the film was in post for almost 2 years, so I had to keep things visual, and that's where a lot of the stuff that I had not yet shared from production came in handy. Okay. And then also just like trying to make everything seem exciting and visual. Like every time we did a sound mix session, I would like take a photo of the screen or do some like audio, some sort of thing that would be like, this is what we're doing with Summit, and turn it into a social media update. To keep people engaged, especially the people that had paid for it on Kickstarter, so that they knew that like your money is not being thrown away, it is turning into a product, even though it's like been 2 years. So
right. And so, what would you say, like of those? You know, I also know that like before you shot, you also did rehearsals, and if I remember, you guys you videoed rehearsals and you shared some, didn't you?
Yeah, we shared table reads, like little sections of table reads, and then for specific backers at certain levels, we gave away like bigger chunks of the table read. And we did like meet the cast videos where I just kind of sat down with the cast and asked them questions like, what's your favorite horror movie, or like if you could go back in time and have been able to play any role, what would have been, fun stuff like that. I tried to make the pre-production or like the crowdfunding campaign very cast focused, because it was very much about like the team behind the film and about me as a filmmaker, but I wanted to be inclusive to the other people, and kind of get people like familiar with these faces who would be on screen in the film itself. But then in post-production, it kind of shifted to more like, here are the people that are continuing to work on the film, beyond just production itself. And yeah, I just tried to give away as much content as possible without spoiling the film or the experience of viewing the film.
So what would you say of those different sort of methods of or not even methods of the different things that you shared? What would you say was sort of the most what were people the most interested in? Were they interested in the rehearsals? Were they interested in the post-production? Was it kind of blanket through, or did people respond more to one or the other?
I think because most of the people paying attention before the film was released were people who had been there from the beginning. They were kind of most interested in what was most relevant to that stage. So like sharing things from pre-production while I was in post like didn't really catch people, but sharing stills from the film, like the next stage that we're at that you have not yet seen, that was exciting for people. I think that getting to see stills from the film was pretty big because, one, they were uploaded directly to Facebook and Twitter and whatever, so it was just kind of getting more eyeballs. But it was also just like, it created this sense of like, oh, here's a sneak peek at the actual product that you funded or that you're waiting for. And it kind of kept the anticipation growing. Anything visual. Like when I would blog, there were certain people, I was always surprised when people were like, I read your blog about color correction. Like, I didn't think anyone was going to read that. But those were less, like, generally didn't get as much traffic as just like quick, here's a visual. But it's also like quality versus quantity, because some people that were actually reading my blog post about color correction were the types of people that would go on to contribute to my next crowdfunding campaign, compared to maybe like the huge amount of people that just like liked this photo, this still, like not too many of them maybe would actually go on to contribute to more of my work, because reading my blog showed that they actually cared about the process and like me as a filmmaker and how I felt about the situation, versus just like, that's cool to see.
Yeah.
And so I try to have like a variety in terms of how I share content, so that everything kind of links to something else. So like, you could just like this still, or you could like click through and read my blog post about whatever, and so I'm hitting people in the ways that they want to be hit, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you're meeting people where they are, and recognizing different people are in different places and going to engage in different ways. And I like what you said about the kind of quantity versus quality aspect of engagement on social media, which is a big issue, whether you're in film or, an accountant or have a bakery or whatever your thing is you're trying to promote on social media. It's pretty easy to get somebody to hit like. It's a lot harder to get somebody to take that next step to actively follow you and engage with your content in a more meaningful way. And those kinds of meaningful engagements are a lot more important than getting 100 likes by spam bots on Twitter who just start liking everything with a certain keyword or whatever it is.
Right. Yeah.
So that it's very interesting to hear how you leveraged and balanced that.
Thanks. I would say, though, actually, I mean, the biggest thing, like the biggest momentum came when we released our teaser trailer. Like, that was kind of huge in terms of pulling in new people. I think for the most part, people weren't paying attention to Summit too much outside of the people that found it through the crowdfunding campaign. Like, we hadn't had a big jump in likes or followers during that period, maybe like a year from when we shot it to when we released the trailer. But once we released that, like, people just were interested. That was a big one, because it's like, it's the film essentially.
So would you say that your social media usage throughout the pre-production and post-production thing actually expanded the audience for the film once it was available to the public?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was largely social media that helped plug it once we released it. Without that base of people that had been paying attention, we would have just released it and nothing would have happened. And it is largely just sitting there because I just don't have it in me to be like pushing it constantly. But in our first 2 weeks, we had like a nice boom of people that were coming in because they had been waiting for it because of social media, but then also people that had already seen it but were following it were sharing it and helping to spread the word.
It's awesome.
Nice.
Cool.
And so, and you talked about it a bit, the blog posts. I mean, I read, I want to say that I read all of them. The Shooting Summit series was interesting. And I mean, I think it's particularly interesting, and I think people should look for it on it's congestedcat.com, and I don't know if there's a specific page there for it.
Yeah, on our blog you can search by category, and there's a Shooting Summit.
Okay. And I mean, I think it's really good. I think that there's a lot of like lessons that other people can take from it in terms of I mean, for one thing, like in terms of like planning and safety, because you planned a lot. I know you did, because we talked a little bit before the shoot. We hadn't even actually. I don't think we'd actually had we actually met in person yet, or did we just know each other online? I think we'd met once in person.
We met, once
because I interviewed
before.
you for the
Right.
web series. There's a lot of like best laid plans, sort of, and then everything kind of falls apart. Do you think? What kind of response did you get from people, in terms of that, in terms of being very open about like the sort of situation you were in, and maybe they were mistakes, or maybe they were just this is just what happens. But what kind of response did you get from people about it?
I mean, people were really just, I think that there was, before I released it, there was this kind of a cool factor of like shooting a no budget film in these conditions, and sort of like how we pulled it off. And part of that is just like very briefly talking about how we built a DIY process trailer and like shot on these icy roads, and like my DP was on this platform that we had built, and it was, it was cool, but we got really lucky, and there were a lot of things that, could have been done better on my part and everyone's part, and it was a huge learning experience. And so I wanted to kind of share what that felt like to be in that situation, and to not have things go according to plan, and how a lot of it is like you can't predict what will go wrong, and you don't always get lucky. Like, I got really lucky that things worked out at the end of the day. And so it was good to be able to contextualize that for people, so that like young filmmakers aren't just like, I'm gonna do that, and then they like try and build a process trailer that falls apart or something. So that was like, it really resonated with people who had made feature films previously. Like, they were past that stage. A lot of people were like, oh, it's nostalgic, which was cool to hear. But a lot of filmmakers read it who were about to go into their first feature, and said that it was so helpful in making them see that you really need to prepare, and there are so many things you need to be thinking about that maybe you're not thinking about. The biggest thing that I took away was like, I should have volunteered to work on a set at that budget level in those conditions, so I would know what it would feel like to be a crew member working on that set. And I did not do that, and if I could do it again, I would. because then I would have been better prepared just for like what it is shooting in those conditions. What does your crew need from you? What should your priorities be? What are the things that you should expect from the environment? And just how can you... And I think, so the process trailer, building the process trailer was successful, and I think the footage looks great, and I'm really proud of it, and my DP's proud of it. It was my DP's idea, and he kind of was like, I want to do this. I insist on shooting it this way because it's going to be bad if I have to sit in the car and, like, shoot that way. And that's, like, cool on him, but if something happened, it would have been on me. And, I was naive allowing that to happen, even though it worked out, and like I kind of don't regret it. I only don't regret it because nothing bad happened, but like it was an interesting experience in sort of finding a balance between like when to be creative and innovative and when to kind of play by the rules and be safe, and how to do right by the people that are working for you. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think that anybody who's been doing the filmmaking would say that pretty much any shoot is at least on some level, a learning experience. And I think I really appreciated being able to read about yours, because there's a lot that maybe not everybody would necessarily want to put out there, like, there were a couple of fights and things like that, and I think it's important for people to be able to see that sort of reality of making films.
Right, and that was part of it. Was like, it was very cathartic for me to just put that out there because I had written it mostly for myself. But then when people, including people that had been part of it, read it, they were like, you should share this. I think this is so valuable to students in particular. And I was kind of like, yeah, but I mean, I tried to be harsh on myself and tried to really contain it through my perspective and say, like, this was my experience. Somewhat like the cast had a very different experience on set and like their own thing going. Like, this was my world on set and what happened from my point of view. And really tried not to like talk about any of the like drama that was happening, like people sleeping with each other and stuff like that, which always happens on film sets, I feel like, when you're on location.
That's for another episode.
Yeah. But like I was very hesitant to put some of that stuff out there and even just like talk about how I felt and like wasn't as strong in all of the moments, as strong as I wanted to be, both like emotionally and in other ways. And that was tough, but I think it's so important because, like, particularly on social media, you can kind of create this version of yourself that is like always doing well and like always successful and feeling great and like everything works out. And that can be so false. And I think it's really helpful when you see someone you admire or who is like a step ahead of you, when they admit that they have made mistakes or that they aren't always right, or the decisions that they've made they maybe regret or have learned from. And I think that that's really important. And so being able to do that for people who are maybe, still in school or just kind of not quite where I am yet, that was valuable. And to get the kind of feedback that I got, it was really wonderful. When I released it, I mean, I didn't expect to get as much commentary as I did, but I got a lot of people reaching out to me and saying that it was helpful to them, and a lot of women in particular, which was really cool, like women directors. And
we should include a link to that post or those posts in the show notes so people can read.
We'll do that in the show notes. And for those of you watching, because we have a few of you, I'm gonna put it right now in the comments.
That was, it was 15 days, like 15 posts every day on set from my perspective. But I also blogged pretty extensively about the pre-production experience, and like we did a location scout that resulted in some like meeting some weird people. One guy who like may or may not have been a serial killer.
Could you stop describing me that way?
And then I also blogged about like posts, and then I did recaps of every festival we screened at, and so that, like, I tried to make it a full experience where you could follow the film throughout everything, but that's kind of like the chunk that is more what did I learn and how can this apply to you, as opposed to just like, here's where we were or here's where we're at.
And that's so useful just in terms of demystifying the filmmaking experience. If you haven't gone through it before, it's not going to be the way you expect it to be. And so much of it is just going to be about dealing with all the crises that come up and problems that come up. And conflict isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's unavoidable. It's how you deal with the conflict, or how you deal with, whether it's an interpersonal conflict or just that there's some sort of logistical problem or other problem. And I think also beyond production, like you were saying with film festivals and stuff like that, like people ask questions all the time about like, what was it like being in and you don't know until you've gone to a festival, and different festivals are different. And having a filmmaker like you be able to say like, here's a recap of this festival, here's a recap of this one. Then when someone has their project and they're going and they're applying, they have a better feel of what they're in for, which is very hard to get through Film Freeway or Without a Box or whatever you're using to research and submit to festivals.
Yeah. That's what I try to. I think we so rarely get honesty because people are, I feel like, cultivating an image. And if they don't have a good time at a festival, or if like people don't really talk publicly about festivals, I don't think.
Right.
Because they're just like trying to get into them.
Yeah.
And so.
You don't want to come off as being.
Right, and I definitely try not to like hate on them, but I've definitely kind of talked about the variety of experiences I've had at them. That's
cool. We should maybe talk about that in the next episode where we talk about release, and the Facebook thing cut again. So if you want to set that up,
and we'll wrap it up with some funny games.
Yeah, we'll wrap that up with a fun game, a funny fun game, funny fun game. So those of you watching, you can participate as well. This one is a little bit different. As I said in our first episode, we're going to try a couple things out and decide what we like the best, and maybe model future episodes around those. But this one is it's sort of a quiz game, and it's guess the Cronenberg film based on the quote.
Okay.
So are you guys ready for that quote?
Ready as all
I tried to find a decently general one, but one that could still be guessed. So it's not like hello or anything like that. Although maybe I'll do that next time. So the quote, the quote from the Cronenberg film, and guess the Cronenberg film it's from, is, "I'm gonna suck your brain dry. Everything you are is gonna become me." And that's again, "I'm gonna suck your brain dry. Everything you are is gonna become me."
I mean, I guessed first.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Oh. Is it Scanners? I don't know if that's...
Okay, that's Christina's guess is Scanners.
I mean, my guess was also Scanners, so...
Anybody watching, do you have any guesses? No? Yes? Maybe? All right, so it is Scanners.
It was Scanners. We both got it right.
Yay!
So yeah, we got feedback over there from other people in the apartment watching.
Because we're so popular that other people
We're
in the
so
street-
People in other apartments.
Everybody's just caught up to us. So or a few people have on the live stream. So that was our fun game. The Cronenberg quote was from Scanners. And let's just wrap it up. People can find us. Where can people find you? You're Christina Raia.
ChristinaRaia.com, CongeskedCat.com. I'm on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Google me.
Yeah.
C-Raia9 is your handle.
C-Raia9.
C-Raia9, not Christina Raia.
Yeah.
There's a whole other Christina Raia who
had it first.
And not C-Raia like S-E-A Raia.
Right.
But the letter C.
R-A-I-A 9.
Jinx.
And then 4 Mile Circus is the number 4, the word mile, and the word circus, all one word. And that's 4milescircus.com, Twitter at 4 Mile Circus, Instagram at 4 Mile Circus, Facebook /4 Mile Circus.
And you should especially like our page on Facebook so that you will be notified the next time we are live streaming a podcast episode, so that you can watch and listen at home, participate in our funny games, ask questions of our guests, harass us. Yeah.
All that good stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
And at 4milecircus.com/store, you can purchase my film, Small Talk, which is 4 Mile Circus's first official release.
And it's just $4.99 for the deluxe package, which comes with a lot more than most DVD releases. So that's our third episode.
And people should probably subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice. Leave us 5-star reviews so we can get more excellent guests like Christina Raia. Exactly. And generally support independent media makers.
And such.
Yeah.
So that's the end of our third episode. Our fourth episode will be coming. And it is going to be about releasing a project and social media. So we'll see you then. If you like what you heard, please subscribe on iTunes or your podcast platform of choice, and check out other 4 Mile Circus services and projects at 4milecircus.com, as well as 4 Mile Circus on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Watch our first VOD release, Nicole's award-winning feminist phone sex horror comedy Small Talk, at 4milecircus.com/store, and be sure to check out Christina Raia's work at congestedcat.com and chat with her on most social media platforms, on which she is CRaia9. Catch you next time.